This is a scenario I considered doing my own take on before, as I even had written a script for it before, but I never ended up recording it, and I was eventually recommended to do this scenario in a comment on a video of mine, so I decided to give it another shot. When I looked back at my earlier version of this script, I wasn't happy with it, so I decided to start from scratch. As some brief notes before getting into this scenario, there are two things I wanted to discuss for my version of this scenario. The first thing is that usually when I see this scenario done, it is done in a way to have Goku be evil. I even considered that to be the way he was evil in my original series about an evil Goku, but I changed that. Looking back on it now, I don't think Goku not hitting his head would make him evil. We have seen time and time again in Dragon Ball that it isn't your innate nature that determines the type of person you will be. The people you surrounded yourself with have just as much of an impact on you as your innate personality. Take Oolong, for example, as he was terrorizing Aru village and kidnapping girls until he came under the influence of Goku. Yamcha and Puar are another good example, as they were desert bandits before they began to interact with Goku. Tien and Shatsu are yet another example of this, as they were in a rival martial arts school that focused on violence before interacting with the heroes. Even the reincarnation of the Demon King Piccolo turned over a new leaf because of the heroes' influence. The ruthless Saiyan Prince eventually became one of the greatest heroes of Earth from spending time around good people. Lastly, the creature Majin Buu, who at one point only went around causing destruction, became an ally of the heroes. My point is that their innate nature doesn't always matter. Having the right company and guidance can set someone on the path of good. As for the second thing I wanted to discuss, it's about a potential retcon that might have happened even if it wasn't explicitly stated to have been retconned. Based on the information we were given in the original Dragon Ball series, it was said that Goku was sent to take over the Earth. However, based on the information given in the Dragon Ball Minus manga and the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, Goku being sent to take over the Earth seems to have been retconned. After all, nothing in those mentioned that he was sent to Earth to conquer it. He was just sent there because Bardock was suspicious about Frieza's plans after he called every Saiyan back to planet Vegeta. So this doesn't change anything about Goku's personality. He would still be aggressive because of his Saiyan nature making him inclined to fight. What does change, however, is the notion that he would have been evil regardless, since we now know that he wasn't sent over to the Earth to conquer it. Also, from what we do know about him, he didn't really have time to be raised in the Saiyan nature of combat and conquering planets. He was basically in an incubation pod until they took him out and sent him to Earth. So, his personality would still likely have been him being very aggressive and ill-tempered, since that's just his Saiyan nature, but he wouldn't be out to kill everyone on Earth. Regardless, when he lands on the planet, he is still found by Gohan. Based on Gohan's comments in Dragon Ball Minus, Goku tried to fight him when he saw him. He would still do that here, but Gohan would easily be able to prevail in this fight. After that, he takes him to his house and gives him some food. Gohan quickly notices Goku's lack of manners, as he stands on the table while eating, but he also notices how he is placated by food. So here is also where I'm going to make a slight change in this timeline, so that Goku doesn't hit his head later. During their earlier fight, I'm going to make it so that Gohan picked up on Goku's innate enjoyment of fighting. Since Goku is violent and reckless, this gives him the idea to start training the young boy earlier to try and help him calm down. After all, he thinks learning martial arts could be a good way for the boy to learn some self-restraint. While at first Goku still doesn't obey Gohan, his starting to train Goku earlier would have an effect on him earlier. He would be more disciplined than he usually is, so he doesn't fall into a ravine and hit his head. Normally this would also send Goku into a coma, but since that doesn't happen here, he has more time to train with Gohan. Something to mention as well is that Goku might remember his parents. Normally hitting his head caused him to forget these things until many years later during the Granola saga. I doubt he'd remember anything else, though, so his parents would be the only thing he remembers. This would mean he continues to be called Goku, so I don't think he would remember the name Kakarot. Even with him remembering his parents, Gohan likely still becomes the paternal figure to him. After all, he's the only person involved in raising him and has been the only person to actually raise him, since when he was on planet Vegeta, he was mostly in the incubation pod. So, over time, Goku would likely still start to call Gohan Grandpa. Anyway, in addition to him training Goku in martial arts, he would also begin to teach him some things. Since they live at a very remote place like Mount Palzu, he would teach Goku about things like the city and people, as they had no communications with other people. One night, Goku would end up looking at the full moon and turn into a great ape. However, since this is early on in his training and he isn't that strong yet, Grandpa Gohan would be able to handle him in this form. The next day, Grandpa Gohan would warn the young boy to never look at the full moon. Normally, Goku would eventually end up looking at the moon a second time, which when he turned into a great ape that time, he unknowingly killed Grandpa Gohan. I don't think that would happen this time, however, since Grandpa Gohan started training him earlier in this timeline, he would be more disciplined by the time he receives the warning about the great ape, so he would be more likely to heed his grandfather's warning and not look at the full moon. Thus, by extension, Grandpa Gohan isn't killed and gets to continue training his grandson. Of course, this would mean that by the time Dragon Ball usually begins, Goku would be stronger than usual, though there might be changes in the timeline before that as well. While Grandpa Gohan would be a good martial arts teacher, I don't see him teaching Goku everything he learned when he was in the turtle school, useful, such as the Kamehameha. He would mainly just teach Goku the basics of martial arts and some basic techniques, such as the rock, scissors, and paper technique. Throughout his time of training and living with Grandpa Gohan, his personality changes as well. Since he is under the influence of Grandpa Gohan for longer this time, he becomes well-mannered and develops a strong sense of morals. I would also see him becoming an honorable person, but he would still keep his Saiyan desire for fighting. While he is stronger than usual, I don't think it would develop into arrogance or cockiness like what happened with Vegeta. He is still weaker than his grandfather. The main change in his personality is that he isn't the innocent and happy-go-lucky child we normally know, though he still would have been raised to be kind and compassionate by Grandpa Gohan. He would also be respectful to others because of him being well-mannered, and by extension, I think he would also be more mature since he got to spend more time with someone like Grandpa Gohan. Regardless, once his basic training and studies with Grandpa Gohan is complete, it's hard to tell what he could do next. He still has a strong drive for fighting, which with Grandpa Gohan's guidance, he would have directed this drive for fighting towards his training. But since he learned almost everything that he could from Grandpa Gohan, he would get restless sitting at home. When Grandpa Gohan notices this, I think he would come up with an idea. He would get the idea to suggest to Goku for him to go out and train with someone else. Now, there are two options he would probably think of for Goku to train with, the Ox King or Master Roshi. While both are good options, I think he would suggest to go train with the Ox King. Of course, he would have noticed Goku isn't a typical child in terms of his abilities. However, he would likely think it would be good for Goku to get a little more experience and training under his belt before seeking out Master Roshi to train with him. So, I believe he would recommend Goku to go and see the Ox King to train with him first. Even though both Grandpa Gohan and the Ox King trained under Master Roshi, they both would have their own variations of the fighting style and could have their own things to teach Goku. Regardless, for him to go train with the Ox King, Grandpa Gohan would likely tell him the way there and draw him a map. After all, Goku doesn't have the flying Nimbus at this point, so he would have to walk there. By the time he arrives, he would see that the mountain is on fire, which comes as a shock to him. Since Grandpa Gohan lived in seclusion, it isn't likely that he would have known that Pleasant Mountain became Mount Frypan. When the Ox King finds Goku, he would still try to attack him for being an intruder. However, when he sees the power pole on Goku's back, he would ask him about it, since the last time he saw it, his master gave it to Gohan. Their interaction would go roughly the same at first, but Goku would eventually mention that he was there to train with him. However, the Ox King would likely say that this place is in no state to train at, since it is on fire, as he's probably noticed. So, as a condition to train with him, he would likely ask him to go find his old teacher Master Roshi since he would have the Bancho fan. As we saw in the original manga, however, the Ox King didn't know where Master Roshi currently is. He'd likely have to backtrack to Grandpa Gohan's house to find where Master Roshi lives. After explaining everything to him, Grandpa Gohan would tell him the way to Master Roshi's island. Since the way he is going likely wouldn't be the exact way he and Bulma went, he likely doesn't run into the turtle. Normally, to go with Goku, Master Roshi wanted him to get Bulma to show him her chest. Obviously, since Goku has not met Bulma yet, that couldn't happen. Roshi would likely just agree to help Goku with this as a favor to both the Ox King and to Grandpa Gohan. At the time, Roshi would still have believed he could use the flying Nimbus, so he tries calling for it. When he tries to use it, he falls straight through the cloud. While Roshi is trying to think about what to do now, Goku would try jumping onto the flying Nimbus out of curiosity. Roshi might decide to give the cloud to Goku since he can't ride it, so it'd just be useless for it to be sitting around. As for what Roshi will do, he calls for baby Gamera so that he can ride him to Mount Frypan. Also, Roshi would still try to find the Bancho fan, but since he couldn't find it, he came up with another plan to put out the flames. Things go generally the same after they arrive, with Master Roshi using the Kamehameha to extinguish the flames, though he also accidentally destroys the Ox King's castle as well. As usual, Goku ends up mimicking the Kamehameha, and even though it was nowhere near as good as Master Roshi's, this impresses the Turtle Hermit, so he offers for Goku to come train with him after he finishes training with the Ox King. With Goku's drive for training being even more prevalent in this timeline, there isn't any reason for him to turn down this offer, so he agrees. Now, after Roshi bids farewell to them and takes off on baby Gamera, this brings us to Goku's training with the Ox King. We personally have never seen the Ox King train anyone, but based on statements characters made in the series, we know that when Chi-Chi was a kid, he trained her in martial arts. Before getting into his training, as I mentioned Chi-Chi, their first meeting would roughly go the same. Even though he isn't a completely innocent and happy-go-lucky kid he usually was, he still doesn't really know what marriage is at this time. So, while he does promise to marry her as usual, he still has no idea what he is getting himself into. Since Goku will be staying with her and her father during his training, she likely interacts with him more, though, as a way to try and impress Goku, since he is even more focused on fighting in this timeline, she might ask her father to train her as well. He already taught her the basics, and he can't really bring himself to say no to his daughter, so he agrees to train her alongside Goku as well. Also, something I briefly want to talk about is how strong Goku and Chi-Chi would be power level wise at this point. There weren't many power level statements for characters at this point, but all we know for sure is that Goku had around the power level of 10 at the start of Dragon Ball. However, with him having had more time to train with Grandpa Gohan, I'll raise his power level to 15. As for Chi-Chi, based on power scaling I've seen for early Dragon Ball, some people estimate a Bulma to have about a 4 and Yamcha to have about a 9, so I put Chi-Chi at a power level of 6. So she was likely stronger than Bulma, and she was shown to be weaker than Yamcha. Anyway, getting on to the Ox King's training, we have never seen how he trains anyone. However, based on what we know about the Ox King as a character, there are some things we can infer about his training methods. Given his towering size and strength, this suggests that his training has a focus on rigorous physical training. This could include things like weightlifting, straight exercises, and endurance training to build raw power and resilience. Since he was a student of Master Roshi, he would also have a solid foundation in martial arts. So, he could teach basic combat techniques, defensive maneuvers, and how to use size and strength for one's advantage in battle. So that part about using size to his advantage might not really apply to Goku, since he's a kid at this point. It's rare that he would outsize anyone. Since we have seen the Ox King use an axe, he might be able to teach Goku how to wield traditional weapons, enhancing his versatility in combat. Even if Goku doesn't choose to use weapons, he might be able to translate some of these skills into using the power pole more efficiently. Regardless of the Ox King's imposing appearance, he still is a gentle and thoughtful person to some extent. He could teach Goku how to use his strength wisely and strategically, as he would emphasize that strength isn't just pure power, but also the ability to think and act wisely in battle. Given how the Ox King is a father, he could also be able to teach Goku values like respect, responsibility, and the importance of protecting his loved ones and the innocent. This would basically build upon the values Grandpa Gohan tried teaching him, thus continuing to develop his character. As for how strong Goku and Chi-Chi could get from this training, it's hard to say. Goku's power level from training with Roshi went from 10 to 24, or to 26 after his tail was regrown, so it was a 2.4 times or 2.6 times boost. Krillin's boost was about 2.75 times, as his power level went from 8 to 22. However, the Ox King is far weaker than Master Roshi, so Goku and Chi-Chi's power levels wouldn't grow that much. I made Goku's power boost about half that, so Goku's power level goes from 15 to 20. I made Chi-Chi's boost more than that, though, so she could also be training harder to try and catch up to Goku to impress him. So, I made her power level about a 2.3 times boost, which brings it from 6 to 14. Regardless, now that their training is over, Goku would still have his mindset on training with Master Roshi. Before he leaves, the Ox King would suggest that he should go tell Grandpa Gohan what he is doing so he doesn't get worried about him. Chi-Chi would also insist on going with Goku to continue spending time with him and to meet his grandfather. The Ox King would allow her to go with him, so they would say their goodbyes. After Goku calls for the Flying Nimbus, they would both get on it and head towards Mount Paozu together.